Welcome to the Vital Point. I'm your host, Jonathan Schecter. If you are interested in transformational work such as plant medicine, psychedelics, breath work, meditation, somatic practices, cold exposure, yoga, and more, then my friends, you are in the right place. Welcome to the Vital Point, the podcast that is for practitioners as well as people new to transformational work looking curiously for more information and guidance. So, if you are new to this type of work, welcome. I'm your host, Jonathan Schecter. I am an integration coach and breathwork facilitator. I've also been meditating for about 20 years and do some mindfulness instruction as well. So, this podcast brings you leaders in the fields of transformational work, whether that's psychedelics and plant medicine work, breath work, or a myriad of other types of modalities. And my goal with this podcast is to not only introduce you to new modalities and practices, but help spark your curiosity to go out and actually practice them. So I hope you enjoy today's episode of the show. Everyone, on this episode of the podcast, I talk with Buddhist teacher Scott Tusa. Scott and I get into a bunch of excellent topics, including what he feels the vital point is to transformational practice in Buddhism, conduct versus the view, which is a very Buddhist flavored topic. He shares an excellent practice that you can do whenever you'd like to connect with your body and the feelings and just become mindful of the somatic sensations that you have. I definitely recommend checking that out. Scott also gets into his story, Buddhist view of somatics, and a couple of Buddhist topics of mind training, which is also called Lo-Jong, and a specific type of Buddhist meditation called Tonglen, which is also known as giving and taking. So while we do get into some fairly heavy Buddhist stuff, I think that the information and the content that we talk about is applicable to anyone, not just if you identify as a Buddhist. And if you have any specific questions about what Scott's talking about, I definitely recommend that you reach out to him or myself, where we'll be happy to talk more about that, maybe put it into some different language and context for you. So there are links on the show page, not only to Scott's website, but also his teacher's website, since he gives credit to his teacher for the practice that we go through during the episode. And I checked out the site. There's a lot of awesome information on there, including a free mini course to help get you into meditation, and meditation with a very somatic body-based kind of connection to it. So really enjoyed that. I'm going to check it out a little bit more myself. So hope you enjoy this episode. And as always, if you have any questions, please reach out. Enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Vital Point podcast. If you are interested in transformational practices of all types, breath work, meditation, psychedelics, resilience, mind training, then you are in the right place. And today I am very pleased to have a wonderful guest, Scott Tusa, who is a Buddhist meditation teacher. He is located in the wonderful jungles of Colombia, as you can see behind him there. I'm a little bit jealous, even though I guess there's not as many mosquitoes in my house where I'm at. So Scott, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thanks so much. It's really great to be here.
So it's interesting, when I started this podcast, I wanted it was called One Question Wednesday. And it was really just like, hey, let's talk about one question. And it was really like my way of getting my foot in the door. And as the podcast has gone on, I really wanted to have a little bit more room to go deeper with the guest and talk to them a little bit more in depth. And what I came up with, I am a huge fan of a particular Dzogchen Buddhist teaching called the 3 statements that strike the vital point. And one of the things that I love about this teaching is I have a book that has not only the actual teaching itself, which is literally 3 lines, but there's a short commentary, a medium commentary, and a long commentary. And as somebody that's practiced Buddhism for a while, it's always something that fascinated me, that these great, wonderful teachers that we're so blessed to have around us can expound and teach so much and so long, sometimes on like a single verse or a single, sometimes a single line of a teaching. And so that was where I came up with calling the podcast The Vital Point. So just before we like sort of get into your background a little bit, when I say transformational practice, what would you consider the vital point to be?
Like within a Buddhist context, or just like general?
Either, yeah, whatever comes to your mind.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I'll speak from the Buddhist context, because I tend to kind of pretty much focus on that exclusively, those perspectives on meditation these days.
Yeah.
So I mean, in Buddhism, we often, one way to, as you probably know, one way to view this is through the 3 yanas. And without going into like a long explanation of those yanas, we can transform via the Shravakyana, via sort of conduct and meditative awareness, and using practices that are deeply aligned with sort of saying, in one way or another, putting like a strong boundary, like saying, okay, I want to transform, so I'm going to stop doing some behaviors that are counterproductive to my transformation, right?
Yeah.
Then in the same way, in Mahayana, we involve our a little bit more compassion, a little bit more of an altruistic view, a view that we're not just seeking sort of awakening for ourselves, we're seeking awakening for ourselves and all others. And through that, we transform via the Lo-Jong teachings, mind training, etc., as well as through the teachings on emptiness, or the view. And then in Vajrayana, I think which is the most, usually it's the most sexy for people in the beginning. But actually, when you really get into the nuts and bolts of it, you see how challenging it really is, because we actually try to see the nature, the essence of an emotion itself or a thought itself, rather than, seeking transformation somewhere else, like saying, oh, well, this is good, this is bad. And, through pushing away the bad, I'm going to find transformation. In Vajrayana, we don't do that. We seek transformation by going through everything and seeing the wisdom nature of everything as we're, going through that process. So, to essentialize that, even though, sorry for the long-windedness, the transformation for me happens via seeing, what is obstructing our view of reality as it is. And so true transformation has to come from removing those obstructions, removing the veils of what blocks our true nature, which is open, which is, fluid. And so I think, just to sum all that up, I would say that.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great answer. It sounds like a lot of being able to look within and have accountability for yourself. You mentioned like sort of seeing where you're at and what it is that you're working with or maybe need to work on.
Yeah. I think there's a sense of radical responsibility that has to come first. And I think that's very much like within the Shravakyana view. And then from there, otherwise we're just fooling ourselves with trying to do some kind of non-dual practice or something like that.
I love that you touch on that, because that within the Buddhist context, that like really brings up something that I love, from Guru Rinpoche, from Padmasambhava, where he said, like, even though I have this view that's so expansive, like I have the Buddha nature and the Buddha mind completely realized, that doesn't mean that I take my eye off the conduct. I'm still paying attention to my conduct, just like you said, like as if I was a beginner.
Yeah.
So that's so important.
Totally.
And I think like within the West, like you said, the tantric path, the Vajrayana path is so sexy, as you put it. And there's so many people that are like sort of maybe skipping ahead because it's so much more sexy without thinking about the foundations and the things that can really help ground that expansiveness in, humanity and, and ethics and being a responsible, a good person.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So how did you get involved in Buddhism?
I'll tell the short, just as you talked about, we have these commentaries that can be short, medium, long. I'll tell the short version, right? Because I also have, like, depending on, how deep you want to go, but you're welcome to ask me more questions if you want about it. Yeah, I mean, the short version is basically, I kind of had a spiritual search journey. Mine started at age 16 when my mom passed away. And I went through, 3 or 4 years of just really searching, checking out different things, reading different books. Maybe you can call like a little bit of a new age soup, but eventually I got involved in actually African religion because I'm a musician and drummer, and that sort of connected to me through the drumming. And I was doing that, going through that for a year or two, and then I ended up coming across a book by Yogananda, the autobiography of a yogi. And this really triggered my interest in Eastern spirituality. And pretty shortly after that, I found out about Tibetan Buddhism, and it just, I decided this is it. And this is there was just a karmic door that opened. And and then I met my first few teachers, a geshe from Kham Tibet, and then one of my root teachers, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, shortly after that. And this was all in Boston when I was going to music school.
Wow. So when I was doing some research, looking at your website and some of your writing, I came across your story, and that really stuck out to me because I felt like I had some connection with you. Like I also felt like I came to Buddhism after the death of my grandmother, and that really kind of like led me into being curious and wanting to practice. So I was like, oh, here's my brother from another mother over here.
Definitely.
It's so interesting, totally. Like how some of those adverse situations or challenges, sorrows that we can have in our life can actually like end up opening the door to something much more large and more fulfilling in the greater sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us in the West meet the Dharma via a strong dissatisfaction with materialism, and or like a strong life experience, like a death like that, or some just strong shift. Or sometimes we just read a book and then the karmic door kind of opens. But I agree with you. It's sort of like, I think, you see it in the lives of Tibetan masters too, like Milarepa and Sarah Khandro and lots of other great practitioners where, they had an episode that was, we would call it like a trauma in our kind of cultural milieu in the West, and this triggered a deeper renunciation to seek something more meaningful. Like, what are we really doing here? What brings true meaning in life?
Yeah. Okay. I think that's a great segue into the next thing I wanted to ask you about. There was a post on your Instagram, like from an article from the New York Insight Meditation Center, and it was about like sort of connecting with the body. And this is something that like is of great interest to me because I think definitely like for the first half of my Buddhist practice, even though I was practicing mindfulness, I really didn't feel connected to my body as much as maybe like using sort of what in the West you would call like a top-down approach, right? Like a mindset, or like I guess I could describe it as like I had an intellectual understanding of some of the teachings, but then as I continue to practice and make changes in my own life, some of my own like repressed traumatic energy and things in my body started to come up. And it was really difficult for me because I didn't feel like any of the mindfulness tools that I had were really addressing what was happening in the body. And so it's been something that I've continuously like tried to learn about and to open my mind to, in terms of somatic practices, in terms of things that within the West that we would call like more bottom up, right? More based in the body. So
Yeah.
how does Buddhism really like look at that, like things that are within our body, the somatic type of events, or what you would say trauma that gets stuck when we're not able to really release it or complete it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's implicit, like within the teachings. I mean, you have direct teachings on it in the tradition within like the, let's say, the four foundations of mindfulness. The first foundation being mindfulness of body, the second feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's explicit. Other than that, I think a lot of it is cultural and kind of embedded in the practices, trainings, views that one would progress through as a serious practitioner. And so it's there, but it's a little bit implicit because those cultures were already embodied. And this is my opinion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what you have is Buddhism coming to the West, like, as you said, myself too, like I see your story in mine as well, which is, very much a top-down person, very much like analytical, rational, and, cut off from my emotions to a certain degree, and cut off from my body to a certain degree. And personally, it wasn't until I had one of my lamas, Soni Rinpoche, who like directly just pointed that out to me and then gave me permission, meaning like I didn't need his permission, but I felt I needed the permission. I was very like into a very traditional form of Buddhism at that time in my life. And I felt like I needed his permission to incorporate other practices. And luckily I met him, and he was able to really help me to move through some of those bypasses, some of the bypass of a top-down approach. But getting back to kind of like my point, which is I think in the West, it mainly happens through the interpretation of being a top-down culture, not everywhere, but generally like the, within intellectual culture and within like sort of where we tend to meet Buddhism in the West, where it mixes with psychology and all that. And so I think it's implicit. It just doesn't come out because people interpret the teachings through their own system and their own thought process, right? And then they don't see what's happening. I think in Tibetan Buddhism, it's tricky because the somatic practices really come in the Vajrayana tradition, and they come once you've gone through some preliminaries. And so a lot of people don't get to that,
Right. What's come up for me, like, without a sort of a Buddhist context, but like within a somatic context, they say like have awareness of it first, and then let it be there, let it be in the body, just observe it, and then let it go. And where I was at, a few years ago was like, okay, just let it go, and then just sitting there waiting for it to let it go without actually like experiencing it, letting it sit in my body and feel it. It was just trying to sort of skip ahead and feeling really frustrated of like, why isn't it going? Like all my other thoughts I can see them come up and then they go, and these body sensations just aren't doing that. What really helped me, I had shoulder surgery a few months ago, and what really helped me was listening to these Vipassana meditations from Shinzen Young that were specifically like specifically asking you to focus on discomfort and physical pain in the body, and then just observing like the mental stories that came up alongside the physical pain. And what I found was like really sitting with that, letting it be there, it created a little bit of space, and I could see like how much of the pain that I was in had nothing to do with the actual physical feeling that I had. It was so much more with like the story that my mind was making up, the fear that I had that it wasn't going to ever go away, and things like that. But yeah,
Totally.
it's definitely been a process.
Oh yeah, I mean I think it's a whole different, for me it's been a whole different way to understand my experience life, and just my experience, because the mind is very fast. and we're very used to that level of expectation, and I'm used to that as well, and of like, okay, well, I understand this. Sorry, there's ants crawling on my head. Hopefully I'm not on an ant hill here. um so yeah, so it's kind of this level of expectation. Okay, I just read that. Oh, I cognitively get that. Okay, I should be there. But actually the mind understands very fast, but the body is very slow. And so that's what I've found over, really it was about 10 or 12 years ago that I started taking somatic practices more seriously and incorporating them into my daily practice and retreats and teaching, of course, eventually. But yeah, I've just noticed we just have to be really patient. The body is very slow. It does not go on our timeline, and there's so much beauty and magic that comes out of the experience of just allowing oneself to feel, let be with the experience, as you said, and let that unfold. But for most of us, that takes some preliminary tools too. That takes some help, because for a lot of us, just the body is really uncomfortable place. Not even talking physical pain, just emotional,
Right.
energetic.
So when you say preliminary tools, can you expand on that a little bit, just for maybe people that aren't as familiar with Buddhism as you and I?
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I'm just talking like somatic preliminary here.
Okay.
And yeah, what I mean by that is, like, for instance, within my teacher Sonri Rinpoche, he teaches a combination of practices he calls dropping and handshaking. And the dropping is kind of the preliminary for the handshaking, just learning to drop into the body and feel, essentially. Learning to kind of like take our backpack off after a long walk. We don't have to carry all of our things. We can drop the mental kind of thinking and feel the body. So that's easier said than done, obviously. So the purpose is not to drop everything. The purpose is to practice that. And then handshaking is kind of the next technique, where we're learning to meet the experience in the feeling world with non-judgment. And there's some sort of attitudes, or you could say mind trainings we take up in order to do that. So that's one preliminary, is the dropping practice. But I would say for some people, the preliminary is working with a somatic therapist, or doing some other work, because if there's a lot of trauma in the body, we might just have trouble feeling, like, at all. I'm not saying numbness is one thing to go through, but I mean just like we might not know how to orient to the body without re-triggering the trauma. And that's where it's really helpful, obviously, to have help, a therapist, someone to work with.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Would the dropping be something that maybe you could take people through? Like, is it how long is that? Is it something maybe we could go through together?
Yeah, we could do dropping and handshaking a little bit. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
and
way,
really just to give some
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, sorry.
Just to give no, it's okay. Give some context, if people want to go deeper into it. So the source is really my root teacher, Sokni Rinpoche, or Soni Rinpoche, and people can go to fullybeing.org, and he has actually online courses. Some are actually free, and I would recommend people do that. I'm not a spokesman for that. I'm just a student of his who have learned these practices in my practice, and I work with them myself, and also work with them with my students, and people who work with me one-to-one. But I just recommend that because he's the source. But I'm happy to lead something, and then if people want to go deeper, they can go there.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. One thing I did want to say that I forgot is, as you were talking, was one good thing that's happening now is there's a lot of recognition coming into the meditative culture in the West, not just Buddhist, but all over the place, how much we need somatic work. And it's become kind of a buzzword and kind of popular, as I'm sure you've noticed, in the last few years. Right. And I think that's really wonderful, because it's starting to rebalance some of those imbalances. And so hopefully, just gives people more tools to heal. And then if they want to enter the path of liberation, then to use a grounded body to work with, more challenging things like emptiness or things like that, or growing bodhicitta.
Yeah, definitely. And you also mentioned Lo-Jong mind training. So I wondered if you could just maybe explain that a little bit more, for the sort of the context of it, because it's something that's been very powerful in my life.
Sure. Yeah. For me, like, the context is really within, the Kadampa teachings, coming from, they don't actually exist anymore, meaning the lineage. The Kadampa actually became the Gelugpa later, and then all the lineages, Kagyu, Nyingma, Sakya, kind of incorporated the Lo-Jong. And basically, I think Lo-Jong has three different levels. As you said, we translate it as mind training. Lo-Jong generally has a level of training in equanimity. So we're training in some kind of cognitive process where we're kind of changing the tape. I think of it that way, where it's like, normally our tape is like me, little gap, me more. Oh, what about me? That's pretty much how the tape plays. So we start to play a different tape by thinking about equanimity, equalizing ourselves with others, thinking, okay, well, this guy also wants to eat delicious food or wants to have, a nice house or whatever it is. So we start to do that. That's the first step. And then after we're proficient in that, really the second step of Lo-Jong is to start to exchange oneself with others. So you're kind of like, first you're equalizing, then you're exchanging, and you're recognizing this comes through the practice of Tonglen, through giving and taking. But the path is really to reduce our own self-cherishing. The path is to see, the more self-centered cherishing I focus on, actually, the more unhappy I get. And not only that, I'm not able to benefit others. There's just a huge gap in that. And then from there, we actually make others more important than oneself. But I think, that step has to come based on the previous two. So for me, Lo-Jong is framed in that. And then it's any kind of cognitive, changing the way we're thinking, practice, training in different attitudes, right? I think of it that way. I don't know, how do you think of it? That's how I've kind of
I definitely think like the different slogans and different things like that, different trainings are very accessible. For me, like, there's always been like a pretty strong parallel between some of those different teachings and like the Stoic kind of philosophy of like, being able to, like you said, change our perspective and take a different view, rather than something that's so self-centered and so focused on the me, like you said. And then yeah, you explained it beautifully, like opening up into this wonderful practice of Tonglen, which is a meditation where you're exchanging yourself for others. And it's a beautiful step practice. Obviously, we're like summing it up here, but you kind of start by thinking about somebody that you love, somebody that you care for deeply, and like really focusing on them and their happiness, and exchanging, like taking the negativity that they might have, and giving the happiness and the peace that you have inside of them. And then you can kind of progress to somebody that you feel neutral about, maybe somebody that you pass on the street. You're not their friend, you're not their enemy, but they're just neutral, and extending that same practice. And then like finally being able to take the people for which you have difficulty with, right? Like I don't want to say, I hope nobody has enemies, but the people that you might have trouble showing love and affection and compassion to, and being able to extend that same love that you would for somebody that you really care about. So yeah, it's definitely a step practice, but it's a very beautiful one, and one that really helped me to open my heart. I think the purpose of all of it, right, is to stop caring about yourself so much at the expense of others. Like you said, the tape that's usually playing is just all about me, and enough about me. Let's talk more about me.
Yeah, and And I think, first within the Buddhist context, we come to a conclusion that that's actually causing suffering for us. And I think sometimes Tonglen is taught outside of that context, and I don't know if it ends up in with the same result, which is like we actually have to see our preoccupation with ourself. It's not like we're denying ourself either. It's just that we're recognizing that preoccupation actually is causing suffering, and that can take some just preliminary work in and of itself,
Right.
obviously. And then we want to see that self actually doesn't exist in the way it appears. And so Lo-Jong actually then points to that, which we would call ultimate bodhicitta.
Yeah, that's such an important point. And, especially within the sort of the realm of transformational practice, even outside, bigger than Buddhism, but just in general, there's so many people, including myself, and I'm guessing you as well, because of the transformations that we've had and experienced, it ultimately like opens you up into wanting to be of service and wanting to help other people. It's not something like, well, great, I found this and this helped me, so now I'm just going to keep it to myself like a treasure. It like opens your heart and you're like, wow, everybody else wants these same things that I was searching for. And if there's something that I can do to help, by all means, I'm here. I want to share that with others. Well, awesome. So yeah, do you think before we wrapped up, we could do a little bit of that dropping practice?
Yeah. How long do we have?
I mean, 5-10 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. All right. So everybody out in wherever you're listening land, like Instagram, YouTube, all the things, go ahead and find a seat that is comfortable for you, but where you can be upright, but relaxed. And just take a moment to do that and just to come into the body in a comfortable way. So if that means doing a little bit of stretching, rolling the shoulders back and forth, go ahead and do that. And we're just kind of coming in to the practice without expectations. I don't know how this is going to go. Maybe I'm a little afraid. Maybe I'm a little confused. See if you can invite those as well. And obviously we have the intention, we want to better ourselves, but we can also cultivate the intention that through bettering ourselves, as we've been talking about, transforming ourselves, may we become a light for others. We can include that in the intention. And so there's a few ways to engage this practice. The full way is a little bit more vigorous. We're going to do kind of like in between. So if you want to close your eyes, we're going to just kind of release and breathe out. So when you release your hands down, you can do it in any kind of way you'd like, but we're going to pick our hands up, pick up our hands. And then on 3, when I count, we'll drop and we'll breathe out like this. And then I'll guide it from there. And when you breathe out, when you drop, just drop into the body, and then I'll guide it. So together on 3. 1, 2, 3. Just drop into the body. Drop into your abdomen, your feet, your legs, whatever is accessible to you right now, and neutral. We drop and meet the body and just feel. Relax into the body, but don't try to relax. Just allow relaxation to happen naturally through meeting somewhere neutral in the body. The feet, the legs, the hands. If the core of your body is more neutral, you could go ahead and meet that, but this is often where a lot of our emotional content arises. So maybe if this is your first time, I recommend going somewhere else. The seat is a great place too, just the feeling or the weight of your body in the seat. And the breath just comes natural, slow, at ease. And we just simply rest in the body. What this means is let the awareness connect with the feeling world within the body. The movement of physical space, the movement of emotions, the movement of moods, the movement of energies in the body. And see if you can just allow what wants to arise. So we're training in just letting be with the body. So letting be doesn't mean we push the experience of the body away and let be somewhere in a peaceful, happy place. Letting be actually means with whatever experience is arising. But again, for beginners to this kind of thing, maybe don't work with the strongest emotion or energy in the body right away. Could also be a sense of tension in the body. Maybe don't work with that right away. Work with somewhere neutral. Drop neutral and drop into somewhere neutral and just feel. Just be. It doesn't have to be exciting. It doesn't have to be juicy. Just as it is. And we meet that, feel that, and let our awareness connect with that. Basically, pay attention to that. But allow it to move and flow. So we'll drop one more time, and then we'll introduce a little bit of the handshaking if you're working with something uncomfortable, if that's what's coming up for you right now. And so on 3, we'll drop again. 1, 2, 3. Just drop into the body and meet your experience with awareness. No agenda. Drop the thinking mind into the body and feel. But we're preserving this aware quality of the mind that can bear witness. We're bearing witness with the mind, but not the commentator, judger of the mind. Just allowing the judger to take a break. And if the judger doesn't want to take a break, whatever, just ignore it gently. We're not making the judger an enemy either. We're just meeting the feeling and just giving preference to that for the moment. And so this is the handshake, awareness meeting the feeling in the body. The dropping simply just facilitates that. And depending on what we meet, we may need to apply 4 attitudes that help us to meet the experience with truly letting be. Letting be is defined by awareness, meeting the feeling, without controlling, manipulating, overthinking, rationalizing, or trying to fix the experience. If it's uncomfortable, especially. We're also not suppressing it. We're not running away from it. And we're not becoming it. We're not sort of personalizing that experience. Awareness is bearing witness, and the body feels. So we can remember these attitudes from time to time. Mainly, don't manipulate, don't try to control it. And this is challenging, so we might have to dip our toe in the water a little bit and come back to a neutral place. That's why it's important to find a neutral place in the body. Again, often the feet or the fingers are pretty neutral for most people. And if that's not neutral, find your neutral place. And we just let be, and we can start to move towards something that's a little bit more activated in the body, and just allow. Drop the judge or the concept that judges it as good or bad. It's just a part of you that also needs to be felt, that needs your attention. But instead of giving it the attention of thinking and ruminating in thought, producing more of the story, we just drop and feel and let be. And so you can really let be with whatever's arising for as long as you want to. There's no rule here. But of course, giving yourself a certain amount of time to train in this can be really helpful. Formally, when it's quiet and you start to bring it into life, when you're activated in the moment. Instead of going out there into the object or into your thoughts, you drop into the body, be with the feeling. Try to work with the resistance to the feeling. So this is a training that takes time. As we were saying, the body is slow. It changes slowly, meaning the internal energy body. So we're willing to wait. And that's the compassion, a sense of willing to wait, to allow, and to not judge the experience immediately. Give it some space and time. So dedicating just this short practice to our continued transformation for the benefit of others. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott. That was wonderful. Such a nice break there.
Cool. Yeah, me too.
Well, yeah. So thank you, Scott, for being a guest on the Vital Point. And, before we wrap up, where can people learn more about you if they want to work with you or find out about I know you write and you have some offerings as well, right?
Yeah. The easiest way is just to go to my website. It's just my name, scotttusa.com, and there's 3 T's there, 2 T's with the Scott, 1 with my last name, Tusa. And then there's podcasts, like you said, writings. There's also people can reach out for one-to-one mentoring. That's one way I offer, service. And then, like I said, I do help people with these kinds of practices as well as just general Buddhism, but also, like I said, people, if they want to go deeper into what I just shared, if that kind of sparks something in you, check out fullybeing.org, which is my teacher, Sonny Rimshe, and really he's the source of this and that particular practice.
We'll make sure to put that on the show page, the link for that as well, to give full credit.
Yeah. For me, it's really important. How to put it? Like, I do things from within a perspective of lineage, so it's important, like, to, I don't have the right phrase. They sometimes say punch up. I say like pass up, to our lamas and teachers.
I can definitely relate to that. When I first kind of started coming into this space, my partner was like, well, you can teach people meditation and breath work, like you've been practicing for so long. And I said, like, no, like, you don't understand, like the people that taught me, even though they're Buddhas, like they pretend like they're just, these old men, like, so the humility is so key, and the respect and the, like you said, of the lineage. So it took me a while to actually feel comfortable with even stepping into that role. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
Sure. Yeah. And thanks so much for having me on. It's really, really nice to talk with you.
Yeah, the pleasure is all mine. And I hope everybody out there really enjoyed your wisdom and the practice as well.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
So, awesome. I hope we can do it again sometime, Scott. And for everybody
Anytime.
listening, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this really sparked your curiosity to take your meditation practice, or perhaps be curious about learning something new. And definitely check out Scott's offerings and his website. He's got a lot of great writing on there, and like you mentioned, a podcast of his own. So he has a lot of excellent teachings out there to share. So I hope you check them out.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time on The Vital Point. Thanks for checking out another episode of the podcast. I hope that you not only enjoyed it, but that you feel inspired to go and do some practice of your own. Whether that is something that is a part of your regular routine, like meditation or breath work, or trying something new, like taking an ice bath or starting a new mindset practice. Maybe you feel curious to something that you've been called to try, working with a new teacher, a new facilitator, or maybe even working with psychedelics or plant medicine in whatever way is safe and legal for you where you live. My hope is that you are, curious and continue to expand your transformational practice, and that this podcast inspires you to continue doing that. As always, if you can follow or subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it on, it definitely helps. And if you can leave a review, even just a few reviews really help to push the podcast up in the algorithm and help make it more visible to more people. I'd love it if you shared it with your friends if you're finding it valuable or interesting. As always, follow me at Blue Magic Alchemy on Instagram, all one word. And if you're interested in learning more about breathwork, or you'd like support integrating or preparing for self-development and transformational practice, reach out to me at bluemagicalchemy@gmail.com or at Instagram to set up a discovery call for Instagram coaching. Until next time, thank you, be well, and keep practicing. That's the vital point.